The biggest, I think, thing I had to tackle was really building out what I would call legal operations.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the things that we were doing that required a lot of administrative time, some of the corporate governance, the contracting.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, one of the first things I did was really start building out a team of paralegals that could really help us. And I think that decision that I made at that point in time has really helped us scale.
Yes.
They've really helped me in terms of just being able to execute faster, but also given us so much leverage. So I don't have to hire more lawyers.
Right.
I actually save a lot of money on outside counsel fees.
How do you build a fintech juggernaut and redefine how employees think about ownership in businesses, navigate regulatory roadblocks along the way, and build a global team to make it happen? Today, we are joined on the abstract by April Lindauer, General Counsel of Carta. Carta's platform of software and services helps people manage equity, build businesses, and invest in the companies of tomorrow. I know I've used Carta to manage my equity in a number of different businesses that I've worked for before. Before joining Carta as Deputy General Counsel in 2018, April spent time as the compliance officer at Assurant, which is a big insurance provider, and as an in-house lawyer at Encore Capital Group, as well as some time at Computer Share, which is another company in the fintech space. She started her career at a law firm in Chicago, and I think this is interesting. You were a legal intern for FINRA, the financial regulator. April, thanks so much for joining me today for this episode of The Abstract.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Okay, so your career, in my mind at least, is so closely linked to Carta's growth story. When you joined Carta, did you have any idea about how big the company was going to become?
Not at all. I think what really attracted me to the opportunity, well, two things. One, just the compelling mission of the company to create more owners. That was something that really attracted me to the opportunity. But it was also an opportunity for me to work with several folks I worked with at Computer Share previously. So it was sort of bringing the band back together in a lot of ways. But Carta was the first startup company that I had ever worked for. So, but I went in eyes wide open, thinking this could either be, huge and sort of where we are today, or, I might be looking to do something else in a couple of years.
Right.
But either way was really up for the challenge at that point in my career.
I think that's such an underrated thing to choose when you're picking your next job, is like picking your boss and picking the team as opposed to just picking the idea or the funding or the salary or what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the people that you work with are so important.
Yes, so important, and that's something that I also look for when I'm hiring team members. You spend so much time at work, and it's really important to have a team that can really just work closely together.
I feel like, as you said, Carta was really your first sort of like Silicon Valley tech company.
Yes.
Or like true startup company. What was it that made you willing to take that risk or want to move away from sort of more traditional businesses like an Assurant?
Yeah. I think it was an opportunity for me to really build something from the ground up. When I joined Carta, there was one person working in compliance, only a couple of lawyers. And so I was really brought in to help build a couple of our products, as well as help build out a team, because I had built and managed teams in the past. So I looked at it as an opportunity to build, and that's what I really enjoy.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of your career has been around financial services or working on businesses that are helping innovate in some way in finance. Is that something that you stumbled into, or did you know that you wanted to work on finance and markets and money? And
I had no idea when I was starting out my career as an attorney that I'd be where I am today. I worked for several years before I went to law school, and I thought I would be an ERISA or employee benefits attorney because I had worked as an employee benefits consultant. And it was really that internship at FINRA, at the time NASD, that really started my career in financial services.
Huh. Take us back to like that internship. Actually, I'm very curious, right? Like, since you worked at, well, they're a quasi regulator, right?
Yes.
Like they're not like a full but they're sort of like quasi independent regulator, not a part of the government. Does that, like working there, working around those people, does that still shape your view today and the way that you go about your day to day? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that time at FINRA was really instrumental in so many ways in my career. I was their very first legal intern.
Wow.
In their enforcement department. And so I worked on just a number of cases there, everything from fraud cases to viatical settlement cases. I mean, it was a broad swath of legal experience. And it really gave me that exposure to financial services. So that's what really started my career in this area. I had no idea when I took that internship is that it would just be that pivotal.
But you never had to get like your Series 7 or whatever it's called? Or,
no, I didn't have to do that.
But do you feel like you have it de facto?
I do have it de facto, and everyone is encouraged to study for it and essentially take the test while you're working there, just so you can be familiar with securities laws and regulations. So I did that. I jumped. I jumped in quite a bit. I also had a wonderful mentor there by the name of Dale Glansman, who is one of my closest friends in the legal community today. Every single job I've taken, I call Dale before I make the leap. So,
That's great. When you joined, Carta was about 200 employees. And today, the business is somewhere around 2,000 or so. So you've literally helped them 10x, I suppose, over the time that you've been there. Take us a little bit on that journey from 200 to 2,000 and maybe some of the highlights.
Yeah, I think some of the highlights were I joined shortly after their Series C fundraising. So I joined at a time when we were really looking to launch what we called our public markets product. So that product was an employee stock option plan for public companies. So we had just formed a broker-dealer at that time, and so that was really why I joined Carta. I also joined at a time where, their core business, they are an SEC registered transfer agent, so it was also to help bolster that compliance program as well. And then also just to help manage and scale all of their legal services. So I joke around and say my job when I started was everything. And it over time, and as we went through various rounds of fundraising, we started hiring for more and more specialists.
Got it.
And whether it was in compliance or in legal. So, but I really joined the company as a generalist at that point in time. So I did everything from commercial contracting to employment to IP, you name it. I was managing that along with a small team of lawyers for about 2 years.
And how big is the whole legal team today? It's like 50 or so?
Well, I manage today legal, compliance, and risk on a global level. So we have close to 50 employees globally. Of those employees, I believe now that 17 of those employees are lawyers. Yes.
When you were hired, you were DGC, and then you stepped into the GC role a few years in, and you've been GC for about 5 years or so, a little more. What were you most excited about taking on when you became GC? And I'm also curious, like, what was the learning curve or the growth curve that you felt like you really had to tackle there too?
It was a huge learning curve for me. I mean, I was very familiar with the company and the products, so I felt like I had a leg up there. But what was really interesting is the biggest, I think, thing I had to tackle was really building out what I would call legal operations. So all of the things that we were doing that required a lot of administrative time, some of the corporate governance, the contracting. So what I did, one of the first things I did was really start building out a team of paralegals that could really help us. And I think that decision that I made at that point in time has really helped us scale.
Yes.
They've really helped me in terms of just being able to execute faster, but also given us so much leverage. So I don't have to hire more lawyers.
Right.
I actually save a lot of money on outside counsel fees as well. So that was the biggest thing I had to really tackle.
Let's talk about that actually a little more. I mean, we're big fans of legal ops on
Yes.
the podcast. I have heads of legal ops on. Our COO led legal operations at Meta and at Coinbase before he joined us. When you were making the case for that, or sort of setting the vision for that, I'd imagine that's something like your CEO and your CFO probably thought was a fantastic idea, right?
Yes.
But yeah, take us into that a little bit more.
Yeah, actually the timing was pretty fortuitous because we had done what we called an acqui-hire in Canada of a company called Kick.
Okay.
And part of that acqui-hire, a woman who leads my legal operations now, Michelle Dent, she came over with that acqui-hire. And so she...
You got a superstar.
I got a superstar. So she really was a partner for me in all things legal operations, and we really just started from a foundational place. So one of the first things we did was I said, how do we, just get our filing, our matter management together? And so we focus a lot of our time on that. Fast forward to today, now we're looking at ways to accelerate our contracting and build into our sales and go-to-market infrastructure. So, but she really helped me lay that foundation. And it was not a hard case to make, especially to the CEO. He loves paralegals. They've been instrumental to Carta's growth from our channel network. So it was really an easy case to make.
Do you feel like you've ever had to bring sort of like the legal team along with you on that operational journey as well? Like, I'm always curious about that. I mean, part of it is selling it to the sales org or finance or whoever's going to back the adoption of the tech. But part of it is also bringing the lawyers along too.
Absolutely. And lawyers all have different ways, including myself, that we like to work and we like to manage our work. I think for me, it was, use the word adoption. It was really working very closely with my leaders to say, look, these are tools we have to adopt, and here's why. It was a pretty easy selling point when people on the team started using, the tooling and realizing this is helpful. I think the bigger challenges with lawyers that maybe have never worked with a paralegal or manage a paralegal, that's something that, sometimes lawyers want to manage that work. So it's really, handing some of that off, I think it was the biggest challenge. But my team, again, is very flexible and adaptable. So
learning to delegate.
Exactly. Learning to delegate.
As you've built out that team, it's spread around the globe. I'm curious how you've gone about hiring and if there are specific things that you look for, right? Like how do you test for people who are going to be very business-minded, let's say, and work really well with other cross-functional leaders?
We are very purposeful when we're interviewing, especially for lawyers. There are times I have hired, for example, I needed someone for employment. We're looking for those skills. But on top of that, we do a lot of behavioral interviewing, a lot of role playing, giving people real scenarios to see how they would react and how they would approach a problem. I'm really looking for lawyers who may not always know the answers, but I'm looking for how do they approach and solve a problem. Instead of, being able to recite, a statute or a law. Because let's face it, we all have to look it up sometimes or all the time. So I think that's really, I'm looking for folks who are adaptable, who are problem solvers, aren't know-it-alls, and really want to learn. So
I like that role playing. Like, do you do that in a group setting, or do you do that one-on-one, or do you bring them in person, or like what does that look like actually?
Well, we did a ton of hiring during the pandemic, so everything was pretty much virtual. Really, in the last 2 years, just as an aside, some of the people I hired I met for the first time in person, which was kind of unique. But no, we do a lot of here's a scenario, how would you approach it?
Mm-hmm.
And we just really listened to how they would approach the problem. What questions will they ask?
Right.
That's the other thing I'm looking for. I'm not looking for someone to just dive into an answer. I want to see what kind of dialogue would they have with, for example, that business person.
Right.
To solve the problem.
I like that a lot. And you anticipated my next question, which is about COVID and
yes,
right, like building out a team during COVID. You became GC sort of in the midst
yes.
of this, right? And was it in the fall of 2020?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, how did you and Carta and your team navigate COVID and come out the other side stronger?
It was really interesting, and this was very public. In April of 2020, we did a pretty large reduction in force, really not knowing what was going to be coming from COVID. What ended up happening was the absolute opposite of what we thought was going to happen.
Right.
Our business actually accelerated and, for lack of a better word, exploded. Starting in mid 2020 through 2021.
Yeah.
Following along the lines of what was happening in the market.
Sure.
So we actually did a ton of hiring during COVID, as well as I also, built and scaled much of my team during COVID. So we were very purposeful as a company. I mean, Carta really embraced, having as much time on Zoom with your teams as possible, and really finding places to connect. But as a company, we really accelerated. We actually got really efficient too during that time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of learnings.
I think, like, as you're building a remote team, just if you're on Zoom with your team,
yes.
carving out time to actually talk to people about what their weekend was like, as opposed to making it wholly transactional, is so important,
yes.
right? I mean, I'm sure that you all had a lot of learnings that you continue to be able to apply today,
yes.
if you're still quasi-remote or, right, I mean, people are all around the globe, right? I mean, I think a lot of businesses got better at working somewhat virtually
yes.
during that time.
Yes, we absolutely did. We also, and we continue this today, we also had, weekly stand-ups where people could just join a Zoom and just connect with their teammates and talk about whatever they want to talk about. So we really got more purposeful with how we were spending time together as a team, and that's continued to this day.
You mentioned at the very beginning having to sort of make like a difficult decision and having a riff, and ultimately like the company, that being the right call for the business, and
yes.
the company coming out the other side stronger. I'm curious how you feel like you and the executive team make tough decisions like that, or are able to have sort of like courage in your convictions, and also how you talk about that
yes.
with your employee base, because that's not always an easy thing to do, right? I mean, I just use that as like an example.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd say two things there. I think one, our CEO has really set a tone to say, look, we're going to have to make hard decisions. He'll often say Carta is hard.
Yeah.
Because we're solving really difficult problems as a business.
Sure.
But he always says, he's going to approach those hard decisions with, are we doing the right thing by the business and by the employees? So we've always treated any reduction in force or any decision really to part ways with an employee as something that we want to make sure is done in a respectful way, that we're transparent, and that we also help them, with a reasonable severance on their way to their next thing.
That's an interesting idea, actually.
Yes.
One of the areas that I wanted to sort of explore with you is how you approach working with regulators. I mean,
yes.
we've talked about how Carta is a highly regulated business,
yes.
right? You have experience working directly for FINRA.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the SEC or other regulators around the globe, right? I mean, how have you managed that regulatory landscape,
yes.
built out a team? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the way that we've approached it is, again, as part of our operating principles, we always want to be as open and transparent as possible. So our approach with regulators is to really have open lines of communication with them. We during my time there, we've started 2 broker dealers, so we've had to engage with FINRA and the SEC and really just making sure we have an open dialogue with them. And I've also looked for outside partners, so outside counsel, who also have really strong relationships and can help us navigate, where are the regulatory policies going today.
Sure.
So I think my advice would be to any lawyer or compliance professional working in a regulated space is also look for those right external partners.
Right.
Sometimes you can't always do it yourself.
For sure.
So.
Is that an important part of managing the sort of like global complexity?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you're operating not just in the United
Correct.
States and not just with the SEC. I mean, I know, like as an example, you have employees in Singapore, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Yeah. How do you manage some of that? I don't know, patchwork of global laws and regulations?
So we always look for those experts to bring them in-house. So we are looking, right now we are looking to expand in Europe. So we have hired a number of people in the UK and in Luxembourg. So really bringing in that in-house talent, because I don't have experience in dealing with regulators in Luxembourg. So let's bring in that talent. But also, again, really finding the right external partners. So when we were looking, for example, to expand in Europe, we actually went out and did an RFP to try to find the right partners, and also reached out to our networks to say who are the best external partners for this expansion.
Why Luxembourg? I'm just curious about
Yes.
that. That's
So Luxembourg, we are looking to expand our fund administration business, and Luxembourg is where a lot of European funds are based.
Are like headquartered or have their offices.
Correct. So that is sort of a launching pad, similar to our decision to open an office in Singapore. That was really our launching pad for APAC. So
interesting. I also think about your tenure at Carta as overlapping with like a series of jumps in valuation and fundraising rounds. And I mean, when you started, as you mentioned, Carta was at a Series C. Today, right? It's Series G, and the valuation is like $7.47 and change billion. Our
last valuation, yes.
Last valuation, yes. But any learnings from going through all of those rounds of financing? That you'd want to share?
Yes, I would say the biggest learning for me was, and this has been something that I've truly appreciated, our CEO Henry Ward's philosophy. When we looked for investors, we were really looking for people that also could help us really be partners to us. So in that fundraising, we also brought on just some really incredible investors and board members and board advisors. So I think that was a big learning for me. And I think, for anyone that's at a startup, it shouldn't be about, okay, let's make sure we can get, the most money as possible. It's also who's going to be on your cap table, who's going to be on your board, who's going to be an advisor to you. I would say the people that I work with now on our board and our board advisors, they are all really caring and just wonderful and want to be helpful. So I think it's really not just looking for the money, but who's going to help you really get that next, inflection point in your growth.
We're talking about international expansion or raising capital, or these are things where legal has a really important role to play. But there's also a question about, like, is legal leading, or is legal working really closely in concert with other partners in the business? I mean, just generally, like, how do you think about that? Like, how does legal set the right tone for something like, we're going to go into Europe, or we're going to go and we're going to raise a Series E round,
So we're really partners with the business. So we have, for example, a strategy team that we partner with very, very closely on all of these growth ideas. As a leadership team, all of these ideas, and we iterate so much as a leadership team, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of the job, is that we, an idea, someone will have an idea, and, it could be from the ground up. But we really have a lot of discussions around, is this the right thing we need, for the company? And so legal is really a partner and, takes a supporting role in terms of, when we decide to expand, it's really the business that's really leading that at Carta.
A last maybe set of substantive questions, and then I've got a few fun ones for you. Carta puts out really interesting reports. I mean, you sit on a really interesting sort of data set, right? You can look sort of anonymously across all these businesses. Like as an example, about the diversity of equity holders in companies. And, are things trending in what we might think of as the right direction in terms of ownership and employees being able to own, and also sort of like diverse sets of employees being able to own. Tell us about that work, and maybe even, probably started while you were there. What inspired it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just given the number of companies that are on our court platform, we have really an incredible data set. And it's something that we brought on Peter Walker, who leads what we call our data insights team. And he was really, the front runner to getting these data sets out. And I think it's just incredible work that we're doing. It really gives, it's not an entire, picture of everything in, the venture world, but it really just provides, I think, so much interesting data that, if I'm a founder, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, well, where am I in terms of a benchmark to this data? And I think the work that we've done to show diversity or lack thereof, right? In terms of equity awards, for example, I think that is really powerful data that, again, if I'm a founder, I'm an investor, that's really important to me to look at, to see how we can make improvements.
Yeah. I mean, you can think of how it could, either through sort of like journalists who are looking at it or the reports that you're publishing, or actual sort of decision makers, people who are at the table who are deciding, okay, we're hiring a woman into this CFO position. What should her equity award be?
Absolutely.
Right. You can see how it would actually drive change in decision making.
Yes, absolutely. And that was really, I think, the overriding goal behind it. It wasn't to dictate, you need to hire more, more people in this particular role with this profile. It was more, are you paying people fairly and from an equitable perspective? So I think that's really powerful data.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm curious, like, what are you most excited about working on next? This will come out in early 2025, right? Like, what's on your roadmap?
So I'm really excited to see where we go from an M&A perspective in the next year. We just announced an M&A transaction a week or so ago of a company called Tactic.
Okay.
So we are definitely looking at M&A opportunities. So I'm very excited about to see where that goes. And then I'm super excited about our international expansion.
Yeah.
We discussed earlier, we're looking to expand more in Europe and in APAC. And I think those markets are ready for Carta.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about our expansion internationally.
So if you're a lawyer in Europe or APAC with securities experience, call April.
Yes.
And
yes. I don't have any open roles right now, but in the future, you never know. Yes.
Okay. I've got a few fun questions for you.
Okay.
Your favorite part of your day today?
My favorite part of my day-to-day job, I would say, is meeting with and mentoring my team.
Yeah.
Every single day, I feel like I'm really a coach. And I love that part of my job. I love that part of my job with my business stakeholders too.
Yeah.
I'm really seen now, and I enjoy this so much as a partner,
Yeah.
not just a lawyer, or in some organizations, a blocker, right? So I really enjoy that part of my day.
Not a blocker, but like, do you have a professional pet peeve? I think this is kind of a funny question.
A professional pet peeve, I would say, are people that interrupt while others are speaking. That is definitely a professional pet peeve. It's something I've had to work on personally.
Yeah.
When I want to jump in.
Yeah.
But it is also something that I try to stop when I see
Sure.
it happening.
Hopefully I have not done that today
You've
during
not
our...
I just interrupted you, but you have not done that at all.
I'm a big reader, and I really like to ask our guests, I mean, this could be a business book recommendation, or it could just be something that you've read for fun recently, if you have a book recommendation for our listeners.
I have two.
Great.
I have two. So one, and you would not think this is a business-related book, but Born Standing Up by Steve Martin is a wonderful...
an amazing actor from my childhood.
Yes, amazing. My parents, had his comedy albums, but the book is about how he became a stand-up comedian and how he made the decision to stop being a stand-up comedian. And so it's really it's a really powerful book about changes and in your life, and how your upbringing sort of influences your decisions and your choices. So highly, highly recommend. And
I love that.
A book that I'm currently reading that I think a lot of people are reading is All Fours by Miranda July.
Oh, I haven't heard of this.
It's more a book for fun, but she's she's directed some films. She's written a few other books, but it's sort of a midlife crisis type story.
Yeah.
And I think it's on a lot of top, 20
lists.
book lists this year. So I won't give away the plot, but All Fours, Miranda July.
Great.
Very interesting.
That sounds, both of those sound like fun books to read on an airplane.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, my last question for you, a sort of traditional closing question that I like to ask guests. It's if you could look back on your days of being a young lawyer just getting started, something that you know now that you wish that you'd known back then.
I think something I know now is that your career is not always going to be linear. I think a lot of lawyers go into law school thinking, okay, there has to be a certain career progression. And what I would say is, really look at what interests you and take chances.
That's great.
Yes.
It's a great thing to close on, too.
Yes.
I love that. As we head into next year. April, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of The Abstract.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.